Gets away from Kante, plays down the line for Suarez. 98 team of the year, Suarez.
He's a big
past
chance.
Ramos.
Suarez, what's he going to do? Tries to feed it back. Is that going to come to Ronaldo? Just trying to get a foot on that, maybe. Gullit now, the man that Bullock loves. Half turn there from Torres. Vieira back to Suarez on the finesse, and there we have it. The Bullock is in London. He turns around, he celebrates. The Bullock, he had a plan and he's performed it.
You're listening to the FUT Champions podcast with Richard and Brandon.
What is going on? Welcome to the FUT Champions podcast, week number 3, episode number 3, and we are back for another week of competitive FIFA talk, whatever's going on the latest all around the world, and of course the big FUT Champs, as we always talk about. Of course, we're called the FUT Champs podcast for a reason. But this week is a very, very big week, Richard, isn't it? Because something's happened over the past weekend, and I'm sure you can elaborate a little bit more on it for me.
Well, the qualifying month is complete. We've got our 64 players on the PlayStation 4, 64 on the Xbox, and we've had a bit of history, Brandon. We've had 3 160 and O's. Shells representing Unilad, Aggie representing Hashtag United, and over on the Xbox, the man who kicked off the FUT Champions podcast, wasn't it, Brandon?
Megabit. Indeed, yeah, Megabit 160 wins as well. If you are wondering who you are listening to, I'm Brandon Smith. Next to me, Richard Buckley. We are the hosts of the FUT Champs podcast. Every week, a new episode comes out. We talk about everything happening in the FIFA competitive scene. And of course, if you listen on YouTube, iTunes, Mixcloud, make sure you do drop a like, subscribe, because there's episodes every week. But we're always not on our own. We do have, obviously, some other influential figures in the esports FIFA scene. Of course, Colin Johnson, Roma, FIFA managers here as well. Colin, hello mate, how's it going? And how did you see the qualifying month end for November?
Well, I was staying up late watching that leaderboard slowly tick down because we were in the position with our player Poacher, who everyone's pretty familiar with. He was on 149 wins with like a really high skill rating. So we felt fairly confident that he would make top 64, but then kind of the Americas players that were finishing up their games really late ended up making it, so he ended up 67th.
Because I've seen him on Twitter as well saying, I pray that a few people won't get kicked out for, obviously you see like people boosting and stuff. Has that changed at all, his ranking at all? Or is he still just out the top 64?
He's still just out at the moment. He's still 67th, but what we're thinking is either there's going to be people that can't go to the tournament for scheduling purposes, or something else is going on in their life, or people end up getting caught for cheating, which is also a possibility, or just something happens in maybe like the signups, or they forget to sign up or something. We're kind of waiting with bated breath right now to see if we get the email eventually, but for now we'll just have to wait.
And as Colin said, I'm sure Rich you can explain a little bit more. So I think we saw it from a lot of the EA guys, just saying even though you have qualified, you still need to apply online or something like that.
Yeah, you've got to sign up through Twitter. I'm sure our guest today will be able to explain a little bit more about the process.
Technically, there's still a chance for guys that have finished 90th place, because say if they get very, very, very lucky, and people can't turn up for so-called reasons, or they forget to sign up, there's still a chance for those guys like Poacher to get in that top 64.
Well, look as well, I'm going to go back to last year, the FIWC. It was in Qatar, the rest of the world qualifiers, and a lot of people, for political reasons happening in real life, couldn't actually travel. Anything can happen signing up to this qualifier in January, so you'll have to wait with bated breath and fingers crossed for Poacher.
Yeah, it happened with the Brazilians as well last year when it came to the FIWC regionals, because a lot of the Brazilians didn't get their visas sorted out in time, and then there was like all that outrage about like EA, not getting the visas ready in time. So yeah, we'll see.
It's obviously we're just about to introduce our guest. We also have a guest on every week, and normally a pro player that is doing very well in the scene. But just talking on that point of visas and stuff, we'll come to later on the show. But it's a bit of a tough one, isn't it? I know me and Rich and Colin, you can explain as well. But like, especially the Saudi Arabian players, they've suffered a few times. It's all to do with a big gambling issue. Everyone's saying that obviously, playing FIFA competitively for these big prize pools, people see it as gambling, and hopefully it's something that can be contained. I think there has been a few changes for some countries, and fingers crossed it can be fixed down the line.
We even saw that last year where there were certain players that I was involved with before I even joined Roma, like Medibob, who was from Quebec. And he could have actually qualified for certain events, but because of like the laws they had set up in that country, he couldn't actually go because they considered it as a chance instead of a skill-based game. And it's just now that people are kind of coming and more governments are kind of coming onto the side of like, no, like competitive FIFA is more skill-based and it's not chance. So yeah, that's where kind of the delineation comes in between the two.
And of course, as I said, we are going to introduce that guest now. We are lucky enough to be joined by Lightning Pandaz, FIFA Pro player. Some of you may know him as Dragon FIFA, but Sean Allen, welcome onto the show, mate. How are you doing?
Hello, Brandon. I'm very good, thank you.
And a fantastic month for you, mate. You are in that top 64. I'm sure you can explain. Take us through the month. What wins did you get each week? Where did you finish overall in the month? And talk about how you're looking forward to that event.
Really, the first weekend I hit a 40 straight off the bat. So obviously, there goes any kind of nerves. There goes anything else that I had. So I was confident going into the rest of the weeks. And then after that, I kind of shattered my 40-0 and hit a 37. So I kind of cancelled out a bit. But then I had to concentrate again and hit another 40, which 3 losses out of a possible 120 games. That put me in a very good position again. And I knew like roughly if I hit like a 34 even, then I'm still in. So I could like, really concentrate as well as like chill out for the rest of my games. And I hit another 39, so I finished 4th in the leaderboard. Wow, and an impressive month for you now. I'm sure the other guys will come onto it as well, but it's so tough, you know. You see people get 40-0s. Is there a tip you can give to anyone that wants to get a 40-0? Just how do you take your games on the weekend? Do you play 4 at a time? Do you play 5 at a time? Do you get them all out of the way? Really, it's best to play when you really want to play, because if you're forcing your games when you're not interested in the game or it's annoying you, there's no point in playing, because you're going to be playing like not really concentrating that much. Every tiny thing that goes wrong is going to get on your nerves, and you're not going to play your best you can possibly play. So
one thing we spoke about last week in great detail was the Fix FIFA, I don't even know what to call it, the Fix FIFA escapade, you could say, in the community with Ryan, #Ryan, who did join us last week. The one thing that I did take away from that was the matchmaking aspect. So in your last weekend, when you did play, Sean, how many either top 100 or like elite players did you face, and how many people did you actually struggle against?
You see, like a lot of people either want to play home games a lot. So if you're sitting there searching, you get an away game. Like some people, and there's other kits as well, human being. It's like PSG yellow away kit. A lot of people avoid them. And so say if I get a game and I'm the home team, and then the other person will just back out, and then you got to search again. So like, some people do actually try to avoid you. Where in my games, like I've actually played Quinton once in FUT Champions, who's a very good player for Feyenoord, I believe.
Yep.
Other players, I don't think I've faced too many like top 100 players maybe, or even professionals, so it's hard to say. So yeah, obviously Sean, you just explained there, what was going through your mind when you did, obviously you're lucky enough to get 40-0s this weekend. When you get that first loss, how was it to take? Because even for a casual player like myself, when you get that one loss, you're like, oh, you know what, I don't know if I can really be bothered now this weekend. How do you move on from a loss? It's actually the same really, because your main goal, whoever you're playing, you really don't want to lose. So if you want to hit the 40-0, say if you lose in the first 10 games, it really takes the wind out of you. Then you don't know what to do. You think about changing your team, tactics, formation, anything just to get through the games. Where I'm really the same. I think my loss came around when I was like 16 or 17-0. So I was still more than half my games to go, and I've already got a loss. So it's kind of hard. There you go. Do you believe in any of the conspiracies, such as you get an easy opponent on a Friday compared to like a Saturday, or do you just take it as it comes? I find on the Friday you're probably more likely to get like a better opponent, whereas on the Sunday, like earlier in the days, depending on how many wins you've already got. So if you're like 25 games in by like early Sunday, you might get a few good players, but. And what's the sleeping pattern like on a weekend league? Is it out the window or? No, I'd say it's fairly normal. Like just kind of wake up around 12ish, and it's just whenever you want to play your games, really. Yeah.
the first thing that I want to jump into right now, representing Lightning Pandas, I'm sure we'll get to that in a little bit. Let's go back to the beginning. West Ham United. Talk me through that story.
Well, it kind of happened from FIFA Interactive World Cup 2016, I think it was, FIFA 16, where I probably should have won the tournament, but I lost in the final. And obviously that FIFA was a great FIFA for me. And on the back end of that, West Ham United ended up picking me up, and I was with them for a good.
Did you ever feel like, when you were playing FIFA, see on the Gfinity sites and stuff, you did play for Excel? Is that correct or not?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever feel like you could play for years back? Do you think there ever would be the opportunity to play for like a Premier League club as a FIFA player?
Not at all, really, because you just kind of play in. I remember the first time Wolfsburg got involved. I think they were the first team to get involved. And I kind of looked at that, I was like, oh wow, this is actually happening. And then I was still I thought, oh, that would be amazing if that happened to me. But still kind of concentrating on my games, playing in tournaments, doing the best I can.
And the way it's going now, do you feel like how long, if you were to give an estimate before the Premier League could maybe come into the works?
Yeah, I would not be surprised if it's even like by next FIFA at the latest, maybe even during this FIFA, because obviously everything's picking up. Man City and West Ham in the Premier League.
Yeah, Colin, throw to you with Sean formerly playing for West Ham United, now moving to a more of an organisation standpoint. There's a lot of pros who are currently unsigned coming into this January event. Would you try, if you were going to give them a piece of advice, would you say remain unsigned and see how the event goes for you, or try and find an organisation or a football club just to represent you coming into this event?
Well, it kind of depends. I think you kind of have to look at the approach of each individual player. So if you're a pro that is very confident and feels like you are at that top level, and because at the end of the day, I think that a lot of very good players made top 64, but there might be some players in there that this might be the best result they ever get, is to qualify for this event. So if you feel like you might have lucked into it, or maybe you just were on fire these 4 weekends, then I would say go ahead and look for an organization early on to kind of get you set up. But if not, I would say if you're thinking long term and you're thinking about this is my career, I would say wait, because I think your value after even just making it out of the groups in one of these tournaments, your value is going to skyrocket. Whereas you can even ask for more money when you go into negotiations with another team, saying like, here's where I am, and this is what I think I'm valued at. So yeah, I think it kind of depends on the mindset of the player, but I would say for most of them, I would probably say wait until after the tournament and kind of see where you think your level is at, and then kind of reevaluate and say, okay, like these are the couple of teams that I'm interested in, or I want to wait for this team even. So yeah.
And also, it's not essential that you do pick up a team. You can see the likes of Tass, currently unsigned, free agent. Kurt, one of the most well-known, best FIFA players around at the minute, doesn't have a team, doesn't have an organisation backing him.
And Colin, why do you think that is? Why do you think some players that, they don't like the feeling of not being controlled as such, but playing for a club? Some of them just like playing under their own identity. And do you know what that is at all? Or?
No, I mean, I think that some of these players are more so just like waiting for the right team. I don't necessarily think it's because they want to be these individual, like everyone wants to get paid for what they're doing. And at the end of the day, like, you're not going to win every tournament. FIFA is a very fickle game, like if you're the best player, you're not always going to win the tournaments, and you're not even always going to make it out of the groups, as we saw last year. And I think it's going to be similar this year, where we're going to go in and be like, oh, it's going to be this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy. We saw what happened when we went into grand finals last year even.
And that was, I think that was a really difficult approach, because I felt like, yes, obviously Grida did exceptionally well, and there was other big names, but other people saying Tass is going to win and stuff like that. And me and Rich, obviously, we did a bit of something with Red Bull at the time, and we looked a bit deeper into it, and we're like, the Americas players, they've got a different game style. It'll be interesting to see how they play. But we said Dito, and obviously did get to that final in the end. But everyone was kind of looking, I think, to the favourites, or like the ones that have more of a bigger following, and that wasn't really the case. And I'm sure you can back me up on this, Rich. It wasn't really that of course, Gridders was a massive favourite, but other than that, the other favourites that everyone seemed to love didn't actually do that well.
Yeah, well, we had the pleasure of going to the media event before the competition started, where the players did get their jerseys for the tournament, and I'd probably say 90% of the people there, 90% of the players, of the 32 players there, said, who's the favourite? Rocky, Tass. I think only 2 or 3 said Gorilla. Everybody else were either Rocky or Tass. So it just shows that coming into a tournament, as if you've got the right mindset, and I'm sure Sean can say something on this as well, it's all about how you perform on that day in particular.
And leading this kind of question on to Sean now, we'll see if we can get Grid on the show in months to come, that he can talk for himself. But obviously you were that man that did coach him via that really difficult grand final. You know, what kind of machine is Gorilla? Because we saw him, it was an interesting FIFA for him last year. He still made all the major events, but he didn't probably get to, obviously he made the last 8 in the FUT Champs, but obviously would have loved to win that. And he kind of took a step back a little bit, then came back at that grand final. Did you know from the beginning you had a slight feeling in that grand final that this is his year, or would you just take it a game at a time?
Pretty much, it's kind of a game at a time, because obviously the groups there's 8 people in your group, so 7 games. But there's one way to describe him, that's mentally strong. Like, he's unbelievable with how he handles, like, his thought process going into every game, every opponent, and even the slight details in the game. Like, if one thing goes wrong, or like one decision that goes his way, then it determines him to go on and like score more goals and just play better.
He must have a fantastic understanding of like game mechanics.
Exactly, yeah. There's everything that, just even when I was coaching him, like, even I knew him well as a player and everything, but just coaching him and just watching him do these things, and even him telling me how he's thinking about these things, it just surprised me more and more.
And when he went into that final up against Dito, was there anything you said to him before he went up there, or?
Yeah, because there was one game that Dito played that I was watching. I can't remember who it was against now, but his opponent actually went 4-4-2 against him when he was like a few goals down, and that was one of my formations that I've been playing with a lot online, that I've been playing against good players with, and actually beating them with 4-4-2. So, like, with that, and I've actually in the past got Spencer to play 4-4-2, and he liked it himself. So I just told him before the game, this is a game, if something don't go right in the first 20-30 minutes, change to 4-4-2, and 100% he'll have success with it. And that's exactly what happened.
And
a bit of coaching, yeah. That grand final, you being the coach, it was sort of a story really, that you got so close the year before, and then you were the coach to coach Gorilla on to lift that trophy and to win the biggest FIFA tournament ever. Can you put it into words what it actually meant for you to be there and to do it with him?
Not really, because it's just that whole big story really. Like, obviously the year before I came so close, I somehow let it slip, and then like going through this next FIFA, like we ended up falling out in the middle of it, and then going on, like I helped him, we helped each other kind of in Madrid where we ended up playing, and then by the time the big final came along, I was actually helping him win the big trophy itself. So it's a bit of a long story.
And obviously via the FIFA Interactive World Cup, every year obviously they get to go to the FIFA Best Awards. Obviously you was there. How was that experience, and was there any standout moments of that night for you?
Yeah, that was just absolutely crazy, the whole thing about it really, because
What's it like meeting, the icons are in the game now, obviously legends last year. What's it like meeting those guys in real life that, they score thousands or hundreds of goals for you on weekend league every week?
It's just surreal really, because like you're controlling them on FIFA one time, and then the next you're literally sitting next to them at the big awards. So it's just crazy really. And we can talk about the move now. Obviously Lightning Pandaz, you're unsigned for a little bit after you did leave West Ham. Talk to me via that process. What was you going through your mind at the time? Was you waiting for a club? Was you thinking, right, I'm just going to get my head down and just try and do well, then hopefully a club will come towards me? Or, what was your kind of thought process after leaving West Ham? Yeah, really, I just wanted to see what offers I can get. Like, obviously I know I'm a good player, I'm far from done now, so I just wanted to see what offers I can get, see what happens next in my career. And I got a few offers here and there, but Lightning Pandaz came along, and they were ones that actually caught my fancy. Like, they actually proven they want the player, they know what they want, they can see the future, they can see everything. So that was just kind of a bit of fresh air, and like straight away I knew what I wanted.
And
was it important to kind of like was it kind of like the feeling of being valued almost in a certain way? Because I feel like some organizations just go out and are like, who's a player in our local area, or who's a player that qualified for this event, like was it kind of like more personal for you?
Yeah, exactly. Before FIFA was actually out at all, they knew what they wanted, they knew who they wanted, and most organisations would be waiting until like around now. They know who's qualified for the event, so pick up someone from that. But they didn't. They took a gamble more or less, like just before FIFA, and it hopefully paying off for them.
And obviously, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure you can join me in this, Rich. Were Lightning Pandaz a big COD team before, or they were involved in COD?
Yeah, it was a few years ago where they had a COD team and that was really successful, but now they're back.
So what was the plan behind Lightning Pandaz and lifting it back up via FIFA? Have they got, obviously without going into too much detail, have they got plans of expanding into esports again with other teams, or is it just FIFA the main focus?
Yeah, like I said, they're fully back now. They will be hopefully expanding throughout many games and then getting bigger and bigger.
I think it's only a positive as well for the FIFA community and as a competitive environment as well, that having a team such as Lightning Pandaz involved in it and having their presence at an event that Sean will be attending in January, I think it just adds more validity, you could say, to FIFA esports as in general. It's great having football clubs involved, but to have other esports organisations looking at FIFA and saying, you know what, this is a legitimate esport. Colin, throwing it over to you. If you were, hypothetically, if you were looking and you were going to give Sean advice, would you have said go to a football club or go to an organisation?
Well, I think that's a complicated question, because if you look at the approaches from certain football clubs and the approaches from esports organizations, I think the esports organizations are pretty consistent in what they want, and I think they value their players a lot, and I think that's not always true when it comes to football clubs. And I think that it's all about the approach. And I think that even just players, when they talk to an organization and they hear kind of the rhetoric that's being used and the way that clubs speak to them, I think they can pretty quickly understand if, they're just in this for this reason or they're in it for that reason. Whereas I think that a lot of players want to make sure that the football club is in there for the correct reasons and isn't just kind of doing it as an experiment or as an exercise or something like that. So
maybe you can give us a bit of an idea, Colin, maybe not just from a Roma perspective, but how would a club normally go about approaching a FIFA player? Would it just be a straight, do you want to play for us, or is it, can we have a chat, or how's it kind of work?
Well, you can see there's been different approaches that have been taken. So you have like kind of the some of the Dutch clubs have just like put on tournaments, and whoever wins the tournament gets in, where they'll have a tournament and maybe the top 4 or top 8 players will then go to an interview process and then they get interviewed that way. But I'm not a huge fan of that process, just because of the way, if you see like the way Ajax has done it, they did it correctly because they just went out and they found the players, like Cohn and Danny are both really good representatives of Ajax. And but then if you look at like how other clubs have been doing it, it is kind of a, you scout the players, at least if you're doing it the correct way, who you want, and you have kind of a list of players that you're interested in, or maybe when their contracts come up you might want to talk to them, or you want to put feelers out to players. There's a lot of players that I know and I just know when their contracts end, and just because I like to have that information in case that that player for some reason becomes available, then exactly.
Leading on to that, Rich, I'm sure you can come in as well, and Colin will have his thoughts, and so can Sean, but we've seen it, as Colin said, there's been a few tournaments where it's basically been, say, 200 people, whoever wins this tournament becomes our official player. Do we think that's a good thing? Because you could just have a one lucky tournament and not be a very good player, or is it important to scout and take time when signing the player?
I think you've got to look at, I think the best indication is the FUT champions. I think if you look at the FUT champs results, you get a wide range.
I think you see as well that there's a player that's committed time as well, 40 games a weekend.
It also shows over the 40 games, if you're looking at this monthly leaderboard right now, you can see consistency. Megabit, for example, I'll just take him because He's the first name that came to my head. He's got 160 wins this month on Xbox. If next month he only gets 147 or something that's below what he set out, people will be looking at him thinking, what a one-off month. Has he already peaked too early? I know some pros, they'll get the game, and in that first 2 months, that will be their time to shine. They'll win the tournaments, they'll get the top rewards. Other pros, it's more of a feeling out process, really getting to learn the game. And also with the updates that are coming in, with EA patching the game and things changing, the pros constantly need to be changing their approach to the game.
And Colin, I'm sure you can add into that as well. We just talked about it recently. I think you obviously come across as more of a scout opinion on it. I think with the Premier League potentially going down the line and other leagues doing the same, would you like to see a kind of approach of, right, we want to find the best English talent, or would you say 250 people, qualifying tournament, ever comes out, wins that one?
I hate the qualifying tournament ideas and the ways that those have been done, because at the end of the day, like, anyone can win a tournament, especially on last year's FIFA and this year's FIFA. It can really be anybody, realistically, especially with the level that a lot of these players at. They're very, very similar levels, and it just depends on who shows up. So I think that being aware of the strengths and weaknesses of certain players in regards to their play style, in regards to, like, is this guy actually fun to watch, because there are some players out there who play the horrible brands of FIFA that are boring and are more maybe possession style, and
you could say
they like to score one goal and lock it.
A tournament of football.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I think, like, if you look at, like, Gorilla, why does everyone love Gorilla? Like, obviously, yes, he's an amazing player, but he scores a lot of goals. People like to watch Gorilla play the game, and I think that's just a fact. And so I think that kind of thing is important to take into context as well, just how easy someone is to work with, if they identify with your club values as well. If they actually want to play for your club, did they support your rivals when they were 11 years old? Because as we've seen in the past, the fans will go and find those pictures as well. As we saw with, I think it was like a player was about to sign for Ajax or Feyenoord.
I think it was Tony K.
Exactly, and they went back and found, like, tweets from, like, 6 years ago. So I mean, you have to do your research, or you're gonna be made to look a bit foolish. And as well, you're investing in these people, you're investing in them as people as well as players. And so you need to make sure that, if you're investing all these resources, that they're a good person, that they're a good player, and that they're going to be able to fulfill anything else that you want them to fulfill, whether that is content, or, it's streaming, or it's coming out to club events, or it's meeting fans, or it's doing sponsor work. There's a lot of different pieces that come into being a professional FIFA player, other than just playing the game.
And I think there's ways to go about it as well. For example, like, there are some esports teams out there that do really do esports the right way, you could say. It's just like Roma, with the streaming, they're bringing in the fans, and Ajax, they do it really well as well. And obviously teams like Hashtag and other big organisations too. How important is that there's that kind of community feel? Because obviously the main kind of guide of this is fan engagement, obviously, to try and maybe bring in younger fans to the club as well. And how important is it that they try and involve fans?
Yeah, it needs to feel genuine, because there's nothing that fans are better at doing than knowing when something isn't genuine, and when it's not, when the club doesn't really believe in it. And if you just sign a player and you make 3 videos with them over a 9-month period, and you tweet when they play a major tournament, like, that's not showing the fans that you actually believe in them and that you're really behind the player. But if the player, like, you see, like, Kez and Danny and those types of players are always out meeting fans, or at events, are hanging out, are doing things more than just playing the game. And I think that's when players really feel valued. Like Insa is all the time, at matches, he's meeting the players, he's hanging out with the players, he's playing FIFA with the players.
It's more of a funner experience as well for the players. They get to travel more, and it's kind of more an experience of just sitting in your room all day and playing the game, isn't it?
Exactly. I mean, it's the same with any a competitive athlete, you know, you have to make sure that they're happy. And if the player doesn't feel like they're being valued and they don't feel happy, then they're not going to want to re-sign with you when their contract ends, you know. And if it's a good player and it's someone that you want to invest in, then you need to make sure that they're happy and make sure that they, as well as keeping their competitive level up, because players play better, in my opinion, when they feel like they're in the position to succeed. And I think we proved it over the past month when we had Poacher up at Fnatic headquarters and had him playing his weekend league games there. The 1 week that he didn't play in the boot camp, he went 34-6. The other weeks he went 39-1, 39-1, and 38-2. So I think that just proves that if you put the players in the correct positions to succeed, they're going to play better. And the same with the #HQ, like all of those guys except for Boris qualified for the major. So
yeah, it's a fantastic point you do bring up there, Colin, about the connection between the club or esport organisation and the player themselves. Sean, with Lightning Pandas, do you feel as though that could be something that potentially down the line you can build upon?
Yeah, possibly, because right now obviously it's just me, so there's really no point in that. If they got more FIFA players in, or even like a Call of Duty team or any other team, then it could definitely happen. Like right now for Lightning Pandas, like Colin said about making your player happy, like I really couldn't be happier with Lightning Pandas right now. They've made sure throughout this whole month, they've made sure that I'm kept satisfied, and it's showing in my performance as well.
Happy days. And what I'm interested
Sean,
in.
No, I was just gonna say, and Sean, when it comes to like the approaches that you've seen from like football clubs in the past, do you feel like there's been progression from like the ways that players were treated even at the beginning compared to like how they are now? Like, is it seen more as a long-term investment, where before it might have been seen as like an experiment without, like going too much into the West Ham experience? But, I think a lot of players have felt maybe undervalued or kind of seen as more of like a marketing exercise at some clubs.
Yeah, 100%. Without obviously throwing a few names under the bus, but there's a few teams now that have done it very well, and there's obviously a few teams that haven't done it well at all. It is good to see improvement.
Hello listeners, it's producer Ben here. If you like what you're hearing, why not subscribe? Just go to @FUTChampionsPod on Twitter, drop a follow, and then you'll find all your subscription options in the pinned tweet. Oh, and also, while I've got you, why not check out this podcast, More Casual Older Brother, the FUT Weekly podcast, for in-depth reviews, Team of the Week rundown, content chat, and general FUT discussion.
What I'm interested in seeing is, and I'm sure we can have a point, obviously the first event is in January. Where does everyone think it's going to be held? If Colin maybe as a tip-off, he might not want to answer. But I'm going to say, I'm just going to guess, I think it's going to be in Europe. For me.
Yeah. It's not going to be London. I don't think they're going to do 2 straight London tournaments. I think it's too soon to go back to London, although I think London's a fantastic venue. I think they're going to want to go somewhere different, but I also think they're going to want to do somewhere that has a very large international hub airport that they can actually afford to send all 128 players.
And obviously, it's got to be somewhere that's got a kind of attraction to it as well, like a big name.
Exactly.
So, I don't know what you're thinking, Rich. What kind of, cities and countries are standing out with you?
I mean, it's going to be in Europe, I think, just because of the amount of players from that area that have qualified. Looking back last year, Munich was FIWC, Berlin was the FUT Championships finals, Paris and Madrid were the 2 regionals. I'm going to say Zagreb.
Where is Zagreb?
In Croatia. I believe it's the capital of Croatia. It's
a beautiful place, isn't it? I think it's
Croatia.
actually really...
It's very, very nice. Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to say.
It's a tough one because I feel like with these events, of course, everyone enjoys travelling and stuff, but they always find it. They've always got to find a place that's got like a big name like a Madrid or a Paris. I would love to see it somewhere different, like in Croatia or Portugal or
Milan.
Maybe not Russia.
Let's take it to Italy.
Yeah, Italy. I was thinking Italy.
That would be really cool. I think that Germany, you could see, like, Germany's a pretty strong bet, both because you have so many German players that have qualified, and because you have, kind of like the Riot Studios are out there with League of Legends and stuff like that. So it's already an esports hotbed. There's plenty of people out here that know how to produce it. But that would if I had to put money on a place, I would probably say somewhere in Germany, whether that's Munich or Berlin, because I think Berlin is where the League of Legends is produced out of. So.
And what about you, Sean? Any hints or tips?
I'd like to see Italy, like Rome or somewhere. But
yeah,
Rome would be really cool.
Yeah.
I want to get your thoughts as well, Sean. What's your thoughts on the Global Series this year and the whole breakup on it? You know, Colin will come on to it after. You don't really play that much FUT Champs. You play 2 months of it, really. And then other than that, you're looking at other events as well. But are you looking forward to what those extra events could be?
Yeah, it's all going to be like, obviously looking at the big picture right now, it's a bit confusing to see where leads where. But if you take it slowly, like obviously just qualified now, so just got to wait till January now and compete.
Because really, you're in a perfect position now. Obviously, you qualified at a very high level as well. Obviously, if it doesn't go well, you can still look to qualify from February, if that's correct.
Yeah, exactly.
And then obviously there's other tournaments that could come out of that as well. But do you feel like, compared to last year, you don't get to play really as much FUT Champs? It's not really surrounded by FUT Champs as much, or?
I mean, it still feels a lot like last year. Like if you want to play, you'll play for the rewards and stuff. And if you don't want to play, like there's nothing making you play really, is there? So until like have a set out till February, then start again.
And what's your thoughts on that, Colin? Obviously, we've come on it a few times.
No, I just think that the most valuable thing, and I've kind of touched on this in the past, is just all of the independent events that are going to be going on. Obviously, we haven't been able to see a ton of them, but there have been a few that have been announced already, like the Levante Cup that's going on this week, which obviously isn't massive, but it is. It's an independent tournament. There's always tournaments. There's always tournaments going on, and kind of
I think the one thing that that really was nice about the Levante one is that there's so many big esports teams in that already, and it's nice obviously for a club from Spain to come into the esports scene and host it, because before that there was only really Valencia. I'm probably missing out a few, but it's nice to see another La Liga side come into that.
Well, yeah, because most of them have honestly like put their eggs in the pro clubs basket, which baffles me.
It seems to be quite big over in Spain.
Yeah, it's strange because there's not. I even kind of emailed a couple. Like I've spoken to like the VFL guys. I've spoken to like a lot of pro clubs organizations, and have kind of had to explain at my position and the team's position on pro clubs, which is we're not really interested in it at the moment, because without EA's support behind the game mode, it doesn't make sense to invest resources in it, and as well, everyone liked to share that little video from Argentina around, but it's just not realistic at the moment with the amount of money in in our esport. We can't really support 11 players on a salary, But yeah, no, it's good to see that kind of more of them are kind of refocusing back to the proper way, to like the 1v1 side, which is where the resources should be going. So, the more Spanish clubs coming in, the closer we're getting to that, Real Madrid committal. So,
do you feel as though with pro clubs that it would be 11v11? Because I've got a grand idea that 5 versus 5 pro clubs could be like fantastic. Like if you had a goalkeeper and then 3 outfield players.
I mean, I just think that like from the arguments I've heard from the pro clubs community, it's more so their argument against 1v1 is there's too much AI, and when your NE isn't controlling the ball. So, I think that's the argument that's being thrown about, yet they want to like still have AI in the game. So if at the end of the day, that's what the goal is to cut out AI entirely, then 11v11 is the only solution for that, unless you want to like make it FIFA Street.
Do you think?
Which would be fantastic.
Do you think
competitive FIFA Street?
Are we talking just pro clubs make your own pro, or do you feel like there's more of a gap for, you play as real football clubs and you just do 4 on each side?
I'm just like not invested in the scene at all at the moment, so I'm not even sure like what it could look like. I'm sure like the VFL guys have some interesting ideas about what it could look like in the future, but at the moment I just think that we need to keep focusing on making sure that, you know, our game is balanced and we get the game to the level where it needs to be, and continue to focus on building our esport closer to that tier 1. And once we get to that tier 1, then we can kind of focus a bit more on, you know, like how else can we expand the game, because you've already seen like there have been a couple of like show match type 2v2 tournaments in the past, and that's always interesting, because then you still I think one argument of pro clubs is that you get that teammate interaction, whereas otherwise you just kind of get, you know, Sean screaming his head off behind Gorilla, and that's like the peak of the teammate interaction. Whereas if you're playing, you know, 2v2, then, you know, it becomes a bit more of like, you know, you're supporting each other. There is a team kind of vibe there, but I think we can still achieve that just through different mediums in 1v1, because all of these players have support systems, whether it's, you know, like Shells being supported by all the UK guys, or it's Timox being supported by all the Germans, you know, like there's always going to be that kind of community atmosphere and kind of that team atmosphere there. You just have to like continue to grow the esport outside of that.
And fingers crossed, hopefully in the upcoming years we can see that. But obviously, Sean, we did post a tweet out earlier trying to get some questions in for you. We got a few here, trying to answer them as honest or best as you can. To someone out there defending in FUT Champs, you know, how can you defend a little bit better and not concede as many goals?
Sometimes it's really tough, because I've tried loads of different things to stop like the quick through balls that happen. Literally, sometimes the game will just say, "No, that guy's scoring." But sometimes, like, if you get like the quick, strong defenders, like right now I've got the prime Rio Ferdinand in defence. Like, he's a massive help because he's quick. He can push anyone off the ball. It's all about that, really. You don't want any slow. Like, I've played against sometimes like a Murasaka or someone like that in defence, where you just know you're going to score loads. So sometimes it's all about the players you actually have. And other times it's how aggressive you are or are not.
That question was from Vega Trainer. If you're listening, mate, thanks for that question. I've got a few about the patch, Sweaty FIFA and a guy called Hamza. We'll talk about the whole patch thing in distance. You know, at what period of FIFA do you think you're at your peak, or do you feel like you're at your peak right now? Because there's been a number of patches since the game's come out, and do you feel like you've adapted to it well? And, you know, a lot of guys have just got angry on Twitter, or the approach that we talked to Ryan about from Hashtag was that you've just got to suck it up and you've just got to improve and adapt to this next patch.
Yeah, it's pretty much what it is, really. Like, the next patch is what you have to play, so you can't just choose like, no, I don't want to play it. So you've got to play whatever they're giving you. And it's all about, for me, I find when my peak is I'm playing like a tournament or a really competitive game, that's when I play my best. So if I go and play like a Division 1 game, I'll probably play like 40-30% of my actual ability. So it's hard to just play a friendly game and play my best.
I think that is about it from the questions there. So thanks to everyone that did get involved in that via our Twitter hashtag #FUTChampsPod if you do want to get involved in future. And of course, if you are a pro listener, just get in touch with the show, and probably love to have you involved one week. But
one more question for Sean: how confident are you that you can bring something home for Lightning Pandas in this event in January?
I'm very confident. I'll always be confident, because like I said, when I'm in like a tournament environment, that's when I really can concentrate, and that's when I kind of thrive from it. Like, playing against the best players, always pushing myself to the next level. That's when I thrive from it, and I really think I can do something to FIFA.
And just a little question to anyone out there that is listening as well. Let's just go through, you know, for you, who's like the overpowered player this year, like the little gem that's maybe not too expensive. A lot of people love Gabriel Jesus, for example, for a player of, you know, not that expensive, but who's quite overpowered this year, would you say?
For me, it would be Son or Martial. Like, really cheap, but really, really deadly.
And
Martial, what a player he is. For me, recently, I've been Taliso at CDM. Just he does a job. He's got an inform as well that you can upgrade to if you've got the coin balance there. But
mine's
Taliso in midfield.
Mine's the most random, Leroy Fer from Swansea. He's got all 70s on his card, and he just does a job. He's cheap, he's cheerful. If anyone's out there, 300 coins or 350 coins, go and get yourself a Leroy Fer.
Are you hurting that much for coins?
Oh no, I just like him. For some reason, when I play, won't go into this too much. When I play Ultimate Team, I've never been someone that just loves having a nice team. I just like having little gems in there that that could just pull something out of the bag. But
like Leroy Fer.
Like a Leroy Fer example. Colin, you know, your boys, obviously you managed and obviously you played the game as well. Who's like their little gems, who's overpowered for them, and who's they really like using this year?
Well, I know Insa's a huge fan of, I guess not a little gem, but he loves Raja, which comes with Florenzi and Manolas as that like threesome. So I think that, like, you know, Manolas super quick, pretty strong. He can get kind of like bodied off sometimes, but most of the time he's pretty strong. Florenzi, I think, is a really underrated. Like, he's in my team, and he actually like pops up with a goal every once in a while. Pretty good finishing for a right back. Has like pretty solid stats all across his card. And then like Poacher's team's pretty stacked at this point. He's using like Ronaldinho and players like that at the moment, because I actually packed Messi on his account, which, you know, I've never mentioned on this podcast before. When it comes to Zima, I'm not sure, actually. I know he's a fan of Pogba, but, you know, the thing is like with our players, we kind of invested at the beginning of the year, so there wasn't really that period of time where they necessarily had to use any of kind of the lower end players. But yeah, I mean, like Bakayoko is as well, like pretty widely recognized as kind of one of the best cheaper options as well.
One final question for I'm sure Sean, I'm pretty sure I already know his answer. We've seen the qualifying month wrapped up, and we know pretty much the 64 from Xbox and 64 from PlayStation 4 who are going to be going to that regional in January, wherever it may be. If it is Zagreb, you know, you heard it here first. So Colin and Brandon, who is your favourite, just looking at the results from the qualifying month?
I don't know if I can even comment. I don't know. There's so many. I think what we can break this into as well is there's 64 top players there, and a lot of the guys are all on 53 wins, 54 wins, 55, 56, and obviously it starts to break up more than that. It's such fine margins at this level.
I feel like you're going to sit on the fence.
I have to. But just looking at it now, how about we all pick?
I'll pick 3 Xbox and 3 PS4 to look out for. I won't necessarily who I think is my favorite.
I'll try and do the same then, but I don't really.
I'll just say who I think is going to win it.
Go for it, Rich.
I think Aggie. I think he's playing some of the best FIFA I've seen him play in a long time. I think with the hashtag lads and Spencer and everybody else behind him, backing him, I think he's going to have a very good tournament.
I would just say, when it comes to Aggie, that I need to see, and this is just coming from a purely like punditry role, not from like a, you know, as a dig on him or anything, but I need to see him compete at that top level again, because he hasn't done anything since the Leger Esports Cup last year, which I think was almost over a year ago now. So, and since then, he hasn't really had many big results, if any. You know, he at FICWC, and he couldn't get out of the group there, and then he played in the regionals as well, and it didn't work out for him there. So I love Aggie, and I think everybody loves Aggie, but I just haven't seen him play at the level. So I haven't seen him play against pros this year as well. So it's really hard to say without seeing these guys play, because you can look at everyone from 1 to 64 can probably win this tournament, you know?
I think I'm just really looking forward just to seeing, you know, the new guys come into it, and I'm sure you can comment on it, Sean. You know, what's it like having, obviously, Esports FIFA, you've seen it go from a few online tournaments to the level it has now. Are you happy to see, you know, the new competitors come in that are doing well? Is that a little bit more competition, or, you know, you're thinking, right, you know, stand off a little bit, this is my patch of grass?
No, of course. It's great to see new faces coming in, qualifying for these big tournaments. Obviously, like, now it's top 64 for the tournament, and as long as I'm still up there, then I really don't mind who's competing, if there's new faces, old faces, or whatever it is. As long as I can still qualify for these tournaments and make a name for myself, then I really don't mind.
And what's everyone's thoughts on the qualifying process this year? Obviously, it's top 64, and it's not kind of based on regions anymore. As a European player, I'm sure you're quite happy on that, and I've got a few facts surrounding that just from the Xbox One top 64. 48 European players, 2 rest of the world, 14 Americas, and then the PS4, 5 Americas, 4 rest of the world, and 55 European players. It's quite a European dominated area. Colin, obviously, you can speak from the Americas kind of region. do you feel like there should be more equal chances, or do you just feel like the level of competition is kind of... I have to be careful I say this, because at the grand final there was a lot of good Americas players. Do you feel like it should be more split up, or do you think, there's a lot of EU, FIFA... I feel like maybe you're a bit more ahead on the esports kind of game of FIFA.
I haven't. The thing is like the way that I kind of judge that is based on like the reactions from the pros, and from what I've seen, any of the pros that haven't qualified from the Americas are literally just like, they have the mindset of, I didn't do it this time, but I'll do it in February, And so I don't think anyone feels cheated. I don't think anyone feels like, oh, this format screwed me. 64 spots is a lot of spots. And, if at the end of the day you didn't get in the top 64, then you need to play better in February, or try and get in through one of these, independent tournaments, or one of these third-party tournaments that are going to offer spots as well. So, yeah.
Rich, what's your thoughts on the top 64 this year?
I think the 64 on Xbox, 64 on PlayStation 4, the players from out the Europe region, they're the players who are good enough to qualify for those spots. I know Gastella and Epsilon Joey both said, look, I've not done it this time round, but in February, guarantee I will be there. And you know what? I think they will be there. The players like Honey Badger, representing FUT, he is good enough to be in that 64, and I think he's probably in the top 32.
If you look at the leaderboards as well, like you have someone like Shells, right? He's in first place. But then you have someone like Principe at 25th. And then you have someone like Danny at 48th. Like, is there really that big of a gap between those three players, between first and 48th? Like, I don't think so. I think all of those guys are at a very, very similar level.
Yep.
It is a very, very tough one, and I'm sure you could comment on it as well. Do you prefer it this year, Sean, or did you just kind of ignore it? I know what the rules are. I've got to play and make sure I get in those spots.
Kind of gives you more breathing space from last year, because I remember it was like literally top 12, I think, was from Europe. So it gives you a bit of that breathing space. But like I know a lot of people thought if you can't get top 64 in the month, then you probably don't deserve to qualify as it is. So that's kind of how I was looking at it.
Do you think as well that, fingers crossed if me and Rich are lucky enough to commentate at them, but they're going to be some crazy tournaments. 128 players will be at them. Surely the amount of games planned, or how long they period this tournament it's going to be an interesting format.
Yeah, it should be. I'm hoping it will be like a longer tournament as well, like over 2 to 3 days. Then you don't really have to rush. So they hope they have it.
It must be, because we used to having 32 players really,
and it lasting 2 days. So you could even be looking similar to maybe like a 5-day tournament.
That would be a lot better for the players. Yeah,
give them time to recuperate, and then they do maybe
instead of the players being like chickens in a shack, or just being moved on, like play a game, off you go, play a game, off you go. And I think if you've got the privilege of being the top 64 on your console in the world, you do deserve to be playing in a good condition.
I also think as well, if you have qualified for that top 64, you should have the best opportunity to get into whatever it may be, to win a tournament, etc. I know last year some of the players were complaining because they might play one game at 10 a.m. because their game wanted their game to be streamed, the organisation, and then they might not play another game till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's a 5-hour gap. I think it should be a much more balanced and fair tournament layout, and I think it will be.
And I think visibility-wise too, it's important for some of these players that are unsigned to be able to have as many opportunities to be seen as possible, And when there's 64 people, it's probably pretty hard to, or 128 players essentially, like for an organization or a club, it's kind of hard to pick out, like who the specific people are you should be paying attention to.
And what's your thoughts on the tournament? Do you think it will be? How many days do you think it will be, and how will it be? It'll be broke up.
I think it'll be a 3-day tournament. I think they'll do groups on the first day. They'll do what would it be? Round of 32, round of 16, quarterfinals on the second day, and then maybe do semis and final on the last day. I just want to see more opportunities for fans to actually come out and watch the tournaments, because I think that's what makes it really special for the players as well, as to be able to play in front of a crowd. And I think, Sean can speak to that too, about, at the grand final, having the crowd, it was a much different atmosphere than, at some of the regionals last year, where we were in television studios, essentially, where you could only really have your manager or, coach or friend or family there.
And you're kind of more playing to an online audience as well, which is, you look at other esports, I know they're a long way forward, like the League of Legends, where they have those fans, but that's what this esport really needs. It needs to have those fans that will come out and they will support at venues, because then we can see that it is moving forward in the way we want it to. Right, so just before we're going to wrap this this episode of the podcast up, as Colin said about some predictions, obviously we got a little bit... we forgot about it, sorry, as we were talking about loads of other stuff happening with the events. But obviously in January, we know there's 128 players in there. From the Xbox side of things, we're going to talk about 3 players each, if we can. I'm interested in a certain someone, Jolly Yolan 01 from South Africa. 154 wins under his belt. He's my dark horse in there. Of course,
we actually we traveled down to South Africa.
Yeah, you were. Was he there?
Yeah. He might have been. I think he's actually a friend of some of the guys we met, because there's kind of like 2 major esports organizations down in South Africa when it comes to FIFA. I can't remember the name of them right now, but I guarantee that he's a part of one of those 2. And as well, it's actually interesting because, Kaizer Chiefs and Orlando Pirates, kind of the 2 big South African clubs down there, they've actually picked up players as well. So it's nice to see South Africa getting involved. Marla is always a good shout.
Marla's in there, Grilly's in there, Sean's in there, obviously here. Ty Walton's in there as well. He's had a good month. You got 2 hashtag players in there too.
Kurt, of course.
Megabit.
And both Vitality, Rocky and
Tiblanka as well. It's a tough one. I don't know if I can actually give 3 players, but I'm going to go for it. I'll go for hashtag Harry. I'll throw him in there. I'll go for Dragon as he's here. And Kurt. I'm just going to throw Kurt in there.
I think you can't really look past Aggie. Ajax Danny is a fantastic player who'd like to turn up at the events. You know what? The big man, Shells, 160 wins from 160 wins.
I would probably say probably Danny is pretty hard to look past. Always plays pretty well at tournaments. I think Erhano is a player that knows how to start a year well. Just because of his experience and how long he's been around. I think that he won't have that kind of settling in period at the beginning of the year. And then I think Mo Aubameyang was really close to making it to that final last year, and I think could be dangerous again this year. And then on the Xbox side, Poacher's going to win the whole thing, but outside of that, you've got. I think Foley has really impressed me this year from the games I've seen him play, and when he was at ESWC as well, played incredibly well. And then lastly, I would probably pick out Fiddle, just because he's one of the American boys. Let's see what he can do against the big Europeans.
And obviously, in a good light, Sean, anyone that's catching your eye on both those leaderboards?
Obviously, I'm not going to say myself, so on PS4, I'd say Shells is my favourite on the PS4 side. 2 on Xbox would be... One's definitely going to be Megabit. Like, he deserves more of a shout out because he's been so dominant on both consoles. Like, it's not just been playing on one, he's been playing on both of them, and he qualified on both. He was so dominant on both, so he's looking very, very strong right now. And another one, probably Fully's a good shout. Like you said, he's been very, very strong this FIFA as well, so I reckon he could be on the up for this FIFA too.
So thank you for that, Sean, and appreciate you coming on the show as well for episode 3, week 3 of the FUT Champs podcast. I'm pretty sure we're going to call it to an end now because we have talked about everything that we really want to. We've looked at all the players that have qualified, obviously not looked at every single player because there is so many of them. We looked at where the event could be maybe in January, talking points with a number of fans as well. We've had your questions in for Sean, talking about patches, how to get better at defending, so hopefully you've enjoyed that insight from a pro player. Big thank you to Lightning Pandaz as well for obviously letting us have Sean on the show. If you have enjoyed it, make sure you do subscribe, whether you're listening on Mixcloud, iTunes or YouTube. Drop a like on the video. Make sure you do follow us on Twitter at FUT Champions Podcast. Cheers for coming on, boys, and we will catch you next week for another episode of the podcast. Until then, enjoy your weekend, and we'll catch you later. Bye-bye.
If you like what you're hearing, why not subscribe? Just go to @FUTChampionspod on Twitter, drop a follow, and then you'll find all your subscription options in the pinned tweet. Oh, and also, while I've got you, why not check out this podcast, More Casual Older Brother, the FUT Weekly podcast, for in-depth reviews, Team of the Week rundown, content chat, and general FUT discussion.